Chicago, 2011. A cop is murdered. Police and prosecutors swear they have the trigger man. He swears he didn't do it. How far will each side go to prove they're right?
Like it's just one bombshell after another, where you're like, what?
The story of a PlayStation, a brain-eating amoeba, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Off Duty, out now. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong. Newsflash,
I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.
Give me a mountain with lots to do. Give me the sunshine, give me a dew. Give me something simple and true. All I need is sunshine and a cool, refreshing mountain dew. So give me my good friends, give me a dew.
Grab some friends and an ice-cold Mountain Dew today.
Mountain Dew.
Hello, and welcome to the Psych Legal Pop Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about popular culture through the lens of an attorney and a therapist. I'm Brooke Brigham. I'm the attorney.
And I'm Tess Brigham. I'm the therapist.
So today we're going to be talking about a new Netflix documentary, and it's called American Manhunt, the Boston Marathon Bombing.
Yes.
That's the right title.
You are correct. You are correct.
Yeah. So this is the 10-year anniversary of the Boston Marathon bombing.
Yes.
And yeah, so this was a great documentary.
It was very good.
Very well done. And I had forgotten so many things about it.
And there were a lot of things that I didn't remember correctly, that I think I thought it was shorter time. I think in my mind, I thought it all happened in a 2 to 3 day span. I didn't realize that.
I thought it was a longer time period.
I thought it was
surprised that it was, what was it, 5 days?
5 or 6 days.
Yeah.
Like it was the marathon was a Monday, and I think it all ended on a Saturday.
Okay.
Late Friday into Saturday. I mean, I have it here.
So I was watching it with my daughter, who's 20,
Mm-hmm.
who doesn't have any independent recollection of it, from the time, but she now knows about it because she actually knows someone who was a victim.
Oh, wow.
Who was standing right next to the first bomb that went off.
Wow.
There were some children. He was a child at the time.
Mm-hmm.
There were some children there. One of the children was Martin Richards, who was killed.
Mm-hmm.
So she learned about it that way.
Wow.
From talking to him about it. So she was very curious
Mm-hmm.
about it. And, I had to answer a lot of questions about global politics and all these, it was a learning experience,
Yes. Well, it's the whole story is very layered, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's very, very layered, in a lot of ways. Her friend that she met, how was that person injured?
He had injuries. He didn't lose any, limbs or anything, but he had extensive injuries to his legs, and he was, hospitalized there in Boston for quite a while before he and his family could come back to California.
Wow.
His mother was running in the marathon.
Oh, wow.
Actually, I think both his parents were running in the marathon.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So I don't know who was watching the kids, but yeah, very, very crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
I was excited that we were doing this, and I was really excited because I have a very I went to Boston University. And so and the other thing about the marathon is it happens on Monday, and it's also Patriots Day. And they describe this at the beginning of the documentary. And so Patriots Day is this very weird holiday that's only in Massachusetts. So nobody's in class, no one's in school. So it was a big deal. And for the college students, it was a day of, if my parents are listening, put your earphones on, put your earmuffs on, because it was like a day of heavy drinking. Basically, it was like Marathon Monday. You get up early.
Yeah.
Anybody that had an apartment along Comm Avenue, so they show you the route. So it starts off way out in sort of off in Hopkinton, and it goes through Framingham and Natick and Newton, and it ends up in Boston. It ends up on Comm Avenue down near Fenway Park, which is one end of where BU was. And so anybody that had an apartment along Comm Ave in that area would have a party. So we would all get up early for us, like 9 or 10. We would get up early and we would, day drink all day long, Bloody Marys into the day. And you would go out and cheer for the runners. And it was Marathon Monday. And it was like, obviously lots of fun. And it was part of the culture, and it was part of the day. And it was just this thing that you did every single year. And, there was like one guy every year that would run the final mile, and then he would show up with that blanket, that space blanket, just a bunch of idiot college students, thrilled. But it was this weird local holiday, this thing that we did every year. And so it was, and the other part of it too, and we meet the superintendent of the Boston Police Department, Billy Evans. And he was a runner that year in the marathon. And he talks about it. And he also, the other part of this too that's really important is he talks about it where it's spring. And I think the other part of it is that on the East Coast, the winters are long. They are very, very long. So the other thing is that it's very exciting when spring finally comes.
Yeah.
So it's this combination of the winter is over, spring is here, the marathon's here, and it's joyous. And we're running in Fenway, so just to set the scene of what this is like and how special it is, that's what that's what the marathon is. And that's what it represents for the people of Boston and that whole area of New England.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
Yeah. So, and in the beginning, this first episode is called White Hat, Black Hat. And we are really meeting a lot of people. We meet Kevin McWaters. He's one of the runners. We meet Karen McWaters. She was there with her friend Crystal. They were going to watch Kevin, who was her boyfriend at the time. So they were at the finish line. We meet a EMT driver. I didn't get her name. But they're sort of setting the scene of what it's like, Billy Evans says, I finished the marathon in 3 hours and 35 minutes and I was heading home. I was done. He was good because Brooke and I ran. Do we want to tell people about our?
Oh yeah. We attempted to do a full marathon and then said to ourselves, what the hell are we doing?
Yes. So we
scaled back and we did the half marathon. And I don't remember our time.
But I feel like it was in 3 hours and 35 minutes. It was a half marathon.
I think it was more like 4 or 5 hours.
No, I think we did it. No, I think we did it in 3.5 hours. And I think people thought that was good because I think we were still signed up for the full marathon.
Yeah.
And people were impressed by our time.
You look great. And it's yeah.
So whatever.
Yeah. No, it's no joke.
So, and then, what I thought was really interesting about what the documentary did was they didn't tell us anything. It was almost like they had the bombs go off without even telling us, like the bombs are going to go off now. It was almost like boom. And then a few minutes later, boom, almost reenacting like this is what it was like if you were there.
Right.
What it was like for these people.
No warning. Yeah.
No warning. Yeah. Just incredibly shocking. like, what? Why is this happening? And then you just hear the silence and the screams and horror of like, what just happened here? And then we meet Ed Davis. He's the police commissioner. And we also meet Philip Martin, who's a reporter. And yeah, just we start meeting all these people, Rick Delorier, who's the special agent in charge. He's there to assess what's happening. He assesses things in great detail to get the best resolution. He arrived about 2 hours after they secured the crime scene. We meet Carmen Ortiz, she's the U.S. attorney. And they just start, they have to start figuring out what's going on.
And they just,
what's happening.
The city just became flooded with, well, first, let me say that by that time, in 2013, we had enough experience after 9/11 and after other terrorist attacks in other countries and such. I mean, I think pretty much everyone knew this is terrorism. Mm-hmm. And also because it's Boston and Patriots Day and it's very American. This is an American themed kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So people knew pretty quickly this is probably, and the city was just flooded with police. Police came from all over the place, from all over Massachusetts. They're flooded with FBI agents, and then there wasn't really much of a power struggle between the Boston police and the feds. Pretty much the Boston police conceded, control over the investigation and everything to the feds. Mm-hmm. But what was the guy's name with the white hair, the big guy? Is that Ed Davis?
The commissioner? The police commissioner?
The police commissioner. The police commissioner was the guy who ran in the marathon. The other guy, the real big
No. Billy
guy.
Evans was the marathon runner. The kind of heavy set guy.
Yeah.
Ed Davis.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So Ed Davis was still kind of, they would consult him and he still kind of wanted to be sort of in charge or whatever. But yeah, it was amazing to me, the precision that, they came in and immediately with the FBI came in and immediately secured the crime scene and started collecting evidence. Mm-hmm. And then, they put out a plea to the public. They said, if anyone has any camera footage and also, the network TVs there. So the volume of camera footage they had between media, just people who were there and all of the store security, because this is a street that's lined with restaurants and businesses.
Yes.
Every store has a closed circuit, TV thing recording.
And this is the different, right? This is the post 9/11 because everyone now, we have so many cameras everywhere and with cell phones, right?
Right. Cell phones are, much more proliferated. So they had so much footage to go through. So, these FBI agents are just doing nothing for hours on end, day after day, but looking through all the footage that they've received. And that's ultimately how they found the bombers. They pieced together footage showing them showing up at the marathon. They're obviously together. They're walking not next to each other, but close enough to each other that's obviously they're together. They both have the backpacks on, and then they see them just going to the points and literally dropping off the bags.
Yeah,
just putting them on the sidewalk.
So they actually, but the thing is, they have no suspects after day one. And the other thing is they don't want to call it a terrorist attack because they don't know. They don't really know if it's a terrorist attack. They don't want to name it that. And if there's still a lot of, even after day one, there's a lot of confusion. The documentary is going back and forth between what the police are going on and the story of Kevin and Karen. Kevin got a cramp and probably saved his life, maybe because Kevin got a cramp. He lost where Crystal and Karen are. Karen's in the hospital. Everyone's going through all of this footage. Obama comes to town.
Well, that I think was later, but like, yeah, in the initial day or two, did they they locked the city down?
Yes, they locked the city down. I'm going in order of my notes. So they locked the city down.
There was a shelter in place because they hadn't apprehended any suspects. And
yes, and they wanted to lock. They needed to lock. Yes, they locked down the crime scene, that area, and they locked all of that down. And they basically were just going through footage and footage and footage. And it really was. I think it was just one guy just staring at this one photo of this restaurant, this bar, and they caught
where the bomb went off.
And they happened to catch just some backpack that they saw, and then they got the picture on the other side, and then they got the viewpoint of that, and then they were able to backtrack it, and then they went back and said, okay, who's moving along, and who, you know what I mean? It was just
they were able to work backwards from when there's just that random backpack sitting there. Mm-hmm. They work backwards, and they find when the brothers first arrived on the scene. They come around the corner, they go to where they're going to drop off their backpacks, and they see them drop off their backpacks, and then they immediately hightail it out of there. And, while everyone else is, it was funny because the bomb goes off, and of course everybody looks in the direction of the bomb, but the bombers don't. They have no reaction. They just keep looking straight ahead and just keep walking.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know how many people they had working on that, but that didn't take that long. I mean, it was it day 2 or day 3?
Yeah. Well, throughout it, they give this sort of hour 1, hour 2, hour 3. I wasn't writing down where we are in the hours, but I feel like that was by the second day. Mm-hmm. They had, and they started to call them white hat, black hat. There was one was in a white hat, the other one was in a black hat, and that's how they started to get that. And they had actually of the kid in the white hat, they had a pretty good side view of him, pretty clear.
Well, and black hat was wearing sunglasses. And his hat was forward. So between the bill of the hat and the sunglasses, it was hard to make out his face. But white hat had his hat turned around, no sunglasses. Mm-hmm. So you could really see his face very, very well.
And then, the filmmakers they did a little bit of a rewind, and we kind of went back to 9/11 and, what's been going on in the world since 9/11. And we meet some other people, one guy from a mosque, and another college student who happens to then know who the bombers are, and just talking about how the world has changed, what this has happened to people and Muslims and the sentiment,
racial profiling.
Yes. And how
the Muslims is assumed to be terrorists, if there's a terrorist act, it's assumed to be.
Yes. So what they were then able to do, once they were able to identify white hat, black hat, they were then able to take all of this footage and backtrack, follow them back in time and create the timeline and to see where they were going, where did they originate from? And then where were they going after the bombings?
Well, and after the bombings, they went into a convenience store.
Yeah. They went to Whole Foods
to get a snack
to get milk.
Whole Foods. Yeah.
And then a convenience store.
I mean, they acted like nothing had happened. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really weird.
But the problem that they ran into was they didn't know who they were. And they didn't know what their motivations were. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of fear around, okay, so are you part of a larger organization? Right. Is it just the two of you? Or are you part of this bigger network? Are you planning more attacks? Is this just the beginning? Mm-hmm. Is this who are you and what's going to happen? And this is where there was a big debate between the police commissioner, Ed Davis, and Carmen, the prosecutor, and who's that? What's his name?
One of the guys who's in charge of the investigation. Yeah.
Should we release the photos? Do we release the photos to the public and ask, do you know these people?
Yeah.
And so the police commissioner wanted to. Everybody else said no, so they didn't. At this time, they decided not to. And this is then when Obama comes to town.
Mm-hmm.
And then now it's the fourth day, and they learn that one of the news outlets are going to leak the photos.
Mm-hmm.
So this, I feel like, is a little suspicious. I was a little like, how did suddenly now this news outlet get photos? Like, did someone inside one of these
somebody had to have leaked
the photos? Like, hey, I'm going to leak these photos because I want to get this thing moving.
They could have paid. They could have had. Yeah, someone could have on the inside, gotten paid.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
So they decided, okay, we got to stay ahead of the story. So we're going to release the photo. And so they hold a big press conference and release the photos and say, okay, these are the Boston bombers. Who are they? We need to identify them.
Mm-hmm.
And and so we learn, and that's the end of episode 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I don't know why I'm obsessed with this shelter in place thing, but I don't know how long that lasted, but I think at a certain point, Obama called again and said, you can't keep a major city, like on lockdown. You got to lift this.
Yeah, well, that was all of that happened. See, the shelter, that part of the sheltering place, that happened during that manhunt for the kid.
No, it was before. It was pretty early.
No, that was during the manhunt. I'm going to have to look at my notes.
Okay. Okay. It's not a big deal. Forget it.
Okay.
All right. Let's move on to part 2. It's really not.
So episode 2, this is, so now they're showing us 20 minutes after the bombings. And, I think they wanted to show us this because we see, this is 20 minutes after the bombings, and we see White Hat, which is now as the younger brother of the two, going into into Whole Foods and buying milk.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what he's doing, and he leaves. This is, and everyone's talking about how putting their photos out is very risky because it's forcing their hand. You don't know what they're going to do. And next we learn about how a police officer is killed in Cambridge, a campus police officer in MIT. And at first it looks like a robbery gone wrong. And that is where Cambridge is Cambridge is where Harvard is, MIT. It's a very wealthy, nice place to live. There aren't a lot of murders there. And so for a campus police officer to be killed is very odd. And then we meet Danny, who's a tech entrepreneur. And he tells us all about how he gets this new car, his Mercedes. He's super excited. He gets a text. And you know what Danny does? He pulls over to the side of the road to read that
responsible
text, like a responsible person, and it bites him in the ass. If Danny had just broken the law, he would be a very different situation. But he pulls over, and unbeknownst to him, it's the White Hat, Black Hat. They pull behind him, and I guess it must be Black Hat that essentially gets out of the car.
He asks him to roll down his window, like he's gonna, and then he keeps asking him to roll it down more. Another thing, this guy Danny, maybe not too street smart.
Yeah, well, he's an immigrant from China. He came here for the American dream, and he's so excited about his new Mercedes.
Yeah, but so they basically carjack him. That both the brothers get into the car and tell him to start driving, and he's just like, please don't kill me.
Yeah,
you can take my car. And I'm not quite sure what their intentions were for him.
I think that they wanted
I think they
they went to the cop because they needed another gun.
Right.
So
and when and going back to the cop, didn't the police suspect when they found the campus policeman dead? Didn't they suspect it was related to the bombers somehow, or no?
I don't know. I got the sense
yet.
I don't think they had put that together yet.
Okay.
No, I think that they. No, I don't think they put that together. I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, I think they were just kind of like, I don't think they had much of a plan.
But it was obviously, like you said, because Cambridge it's not a place where people get murdered ever.
Yes.
And it was pretty brutal. And it was like, there was some clue. I have a recollection that they were sort of clued in that maybe this had something to do with it, but I don't remember. But anyway, I think they wanted this guy Danny's car because obviously he didn't have a gun.
Yeah. And so they were driving around, and one was in the car with Danny and the other one was in the other car, like following along. So I don't know what the plan was there. And Danny was pretty smart. He basically told them, like, he asked them, like, are you going to kill me? They said, no, I'm going to just take you somewhere and drop you off. But Danny was like, I don't know if I'm going to get through this. And then Danny was smart enough to say, well, I only have a quarter tank of gas, so we should stop at the gas station. And they find a gas station. And then the other guy puts his gun down, and Danny sees his moment and is like, this is now or never. And he runs out of the car, runs across the street. You see the videotape of Danny getting across and being like, these people are going to kill me.
Yeah,
running
for his life. Yeah.
Running for his life. So we finally, have, so he's out of the car. And
he runs into the gas station, store where you pay for your gas, and tells the guy in there to call the police. And
we hear the 911 call. And because this was a car and Danny was super excited about it, he said, I have a tracking system in my car, because these guys immediately take off.
And he'd memorized the number.
Yes, he had. Thank God for Danny. Danny was so responsible.
I know.
No texting and driving, and memorized his tracking system. And then we meet two guys that I respected at first and then thought, who are these people? Jeff Puglisi, Sergeant Jeff Puglisi, and John McClellan. They are part of the Watertown Police Department.
Oh, God.
I mean, I was just like, who are you two people? So they get this call that is a reported carjacking, and maybe armed, right? They thought it was a couple of kids.
Yeah.
So they get this call that there's this Mercedes. This is about Friday night. There's gunfire in the streets. So what do these two guys do? Watertown is a tiny little town, very residential. They see the Mercedes going down the street. And I don't know who started shooting first, but these two people, these police officers in the middle of this very residential street full of families there's a gun. There is a violent shootout.
Right.
With the two brothers.
And also, mind you, they don't even know that these are the bombing suspects. That's the thing. These Watertown police people, this was so infuriating to me. They think this is just a run-of-the-mill carjacking. Yeah. Okay. It'd be one thing if they were like, hey, the Boston bombers are in this car, no, over a simple carjacking, they risked so many people's lives because they spot the car, and then I don't know who started firing first, if it was the brothers or the police.
I'm sure the brothers started firing, and I think that I'm sure the brothers started firing first, but just the wild firing.
Oh, and then random firing of.
I think that one of the brothers was like throwing pipe bombs.
Yes.
It was just like the response was just like, Jesus Christ.
It did not, it was out of control. It didn't match,
like a war. It became a war zone. Everybody along the street was just like, what is going on?
People are calling 911 left and right. And they're like, yeah, we're aware of it. We're aware of it. And they have this huge shootout. And then the brothers get away. And then the next.
No, the brothers don't. No. So So one of the guys cuts around. He cuts around. One of them smartens up. So he's like, I flanked him and I went around the side, and he goes around and he starts shooting at the older brother and like literally starts shooting at him, and he shoots him 8 times and somehow doesn't get him down. And then the brother's gun gets jammed, and they are trying to take the older brother down. They're trying to take him down.
And this guy's been shot multiple times, and he's still walking.
He's still walking.
He's walking very strangely, but he is walking.
And he's approaching them. This is the part I don't understand. So there's 2 guys. So you have one guy approaching you. So both of them kind of like lunge. They're trying to put the cuffs on this one guy. So they're not paying attention to the second guy at all. They're trying to put and he's like throwing his gun at him. Mm-hmm. They're trying to do that. They're not paying attention to the second guy. So in the midst of all of this, the second guy, the white hat, gets into the Mercedes, drives over, and the 2 cops get out of the way. He drives over his brother and rips him
drags
him, rips him apart, and goes and gets away.
Yeah.
I mean, these police officers, you're just like, what the what? And apparently I don't know if I wrote down how many, I mean, they show you all of the bullet holes.
Yeah. The next day,
they almost killed the child.
Yeah. In the daylight, they go and they show just probably a fraction of what there really was. Bullets pierced through the walls of these homes. Mm-hmm. And it's a goddamn miracle that nobody was killed in this shootout. And, a bullet almost killed a baby. It came within inches of killing this baby. I mean, it was so irresponsible. And that one guy, like the real fair-skinned guy, I don't know his name, but he's just laughing about it.
Yeah, that was John. Yeah.
He's just cackling about it. Like he's smiling and laughing like that. He's like, man, that was probably the most fun he's ever had as a police officer. Normally nothing happens in Watertown. And all of a sudden something happens and they lose their minds.
But the whole thing was so crazy. It's just like, but there's 2 of you. You just had this shootout. There's 2 guys. Like, you don't have some protocol for like, okay, this guy, I know he's a bit of a monster and you got to get the cuffs on him, but you've got a second person over here. Right. Doesn't one of you watch him or put a gun on him or something? Like, there's no protocol for this. This is crazy.
It was really a mess.
Insane.
Now, at this point, they still don't know these guys' identity.
They don't. Right. Because so they get the other guy who's a mangled mess, black hat.
They get his fingerprints. Right?
They get his fingerprints, and they find that he is it Tamerlan Tsarnaev, and he's a Chechen national. He lives in Cambridge, and he'd been living here for many years. And it turned out that the FBI knew this guy because he was looked at in the past. He was what they call a guardian lead, lowest level, which means that they had an uncorroborated single source information lead that came in, which means some sort of lead came in. I guess he said jihad on a phone call once.
Yeah.
They brought him in. They asked him some questions. He didn't tick any boxes. So they said bye. And that was it. And then they let him go.
Something that I'm sure was not allowed prior to 9/11. And obviously they fingerprinted him.
What do you mean not allowed prior?
Well,
like bringing him in?
Yeah.
Oh.
And fingerprinting him. You know what I mean? Like, because I highly doubt that prior to 9/11, you could have done that. You can't do that with a regular person, unless you suspect them of terrorism. You can't do that. You have to, arrest them first. But anyway.
Yeah. And then we meet David Filipov. He's a Boston Globe reporter and one of my favorite people in this.
Oh, I love him.
And he talks about Chechnya in the late 1990s. They were a persecuted country. Russia was trying to infiltrate them. And so
they were a Russian republic. And a lot of the Russian republics, tried to break away. And Chechnya, it has a long history, not just, with Putin, but even long history of trying to break free
from
Russia and the Soviet Union. Yeah.
And so the U.S. would give Chechenians refugee status.
Mm-hmm.
And so Tamerlan's family came to the U.S. and they came to Boston. And Tamerlan was he came here as a teen and he was a boxer. And we meet John Allen, who was Tamerlan's trainer. And he said that Tamerlan was a very talented boxer, that his father was his trainer before. His dad was very intense, and that he was, he was going for the Olympics, that he was really, really talented. But they later found out that he couldn't go to the Olympics because he wasn't a U.S. citizen. And this, I think, was sort of the beginning of maybe Tamerlan's disillusionment. He felt like it was rigged because I'm a Muslim. And he was starting to use that as an excuse that everyone was against Muslims and justify where his life was going.
Well, it's kind of true. I also wondered if the Olympic thing, again, I wonder if prior to 9/11, that was the rule.
That's a good question. I don't know.
Because we're such a nation of immigrants, I find it hard to believe that, no non-U.S. U.S. born person has ever represented the United States in the Olympics.
It's a darn good question. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up later. But yeah, and life was difficult. They talked about how they thought that America was they're going to get the American dream, and and they got to America and things. They're this family of, I don't know, there was like 4 kids and.
Yeah, they
mom and dad living in a little apartment.
Yeah, but they kept alluding to it. They never sort of, I know that we don't know a lot because no one was really in the family talking, but they kept talking about like the American dream, the American dream, the American dream. And then we never really heard much about specifically what was it? Was it the fact that you were in this tiny apartment, that he wasn't able to...
discrimination.
The discrimination, was it just all of that, or was it?
Yeah,
because I got the sense from the trainer. The trainer did say, okay, yes, okay, you can't go to the Olympics, and they're okay, they're racist, they're discriminating against you. But the trainer did say, well, you could go professional, and he's saying, no, I can't. I don't know. If playing devil's advocate here, he could make other choices. Could he have made other choices? Could he have made a career out of this?
True, but you just got to think about the time in which they grew up. And their friend who was interviewed, the young man, he spoke to this. Okay, this is 2013. It's been 12 years since 9/11. So he's grown up. The younger brother, Dzhokhar, he's basically his entire life he's grown up post 9/11. And Tamerlan, the same thing. It has an impact.
Yeah.
And they're living in a major city. And even though they're living in a major city, that's the thing. It's just, it was and still is so hard for Muslim people.
Yes.
Post 9/11. So
no, I absolutely agree with that. I guess I just wonder, right? And I think some of it is, and this is always this question, right? Why one person can say, this is unfair, this sucks, but I have other options, or I can figure this out, versus the other person who says, this is unfair, and I'm going to, and I'm going to make the best, and F you people, I'm going to make a bomb and I'm going to stick it here. Right? Do you ever watch the show Rami?
No.
There's a show, it's on Hulu, called Rami. It's Rami Malek, the comedian.
Oh,
And it's a great show. It's all about his life, and he is Muslim, and his family's from Egypt? No, are they from Egypt, or are they from... Anyway, he is, he talks about this, and he did an episode where it's all about... He's grew up in New Jersey, and it's about his present day life in New Jersey, but he goes back in time and talks about what happened to him at 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of the first episode that was really done about what it's like to be a Muslim kid on 9/11. And, it shows his dad like out there that day with the American flag, like, hi neighbors, put this American flag up, hooray, And I'm sure it's unbelievably difficult, and the racism, and it is one of these things that is still acceptable in the world that we live in today, to be racist against Muslims. And the show, I think it's a great show. Anybody out there, I highly recommend it. It's a great show. And it's great because what I think is so interesting about it, and I think this is also what I think we learn later, what Tamerlan's going through, is how hard it is for young men and women to be a Muslim, because the rules are really strict. You can't have sex before marriage, no drinking, no drugs. It's a lot. And then there's such this, no masturbation. So like it's like Rami's like, he's like, jerking off and like feeling guilty. And then like, what I mean? It's such angst and anxiety.
Well, that sounds like a lot of other religions too. But.
Yes, it is. But it does. It just feels so overwhelming. But it is. Yeah. It's that same kind of like, who am I? And, what does it mean to be a Muslim? And what does it mean to be connected to my culture? But what does it also mean to be an American and to want to be part of this? And anyway, it's a great show.
Well, and the younger brothers he was more well-adjusted.
Yes.
Initially growing up, and their friend talks about this. He was popular. He did wrestling or something.
Yeah, he was a wrestler.
Yeah, he was much, much more assimilated into the American lifestyle. But it seemed like at the end there, he kind of got corrupted by his brother. Well,
and I also think, so what I think is really interesting is I think both of them had a moment in time where both of them sort of like had a big kind of identity crisis. Who am I? What is my life all about moment? And they both, instead of finding whatever that inner strength is or having someone in their corner to pull them up, they made a different choice. Yeah. And I think for the older brother, he could not see it or wouldn't see it. And I think for the younger brother, I think if there was someone else there besides the older brother, I think he would have made a different choice. Because I think that was the problem.
Yeah, their parents went back to Chechnya.
Yeah. So I think for the younger brother, I think if the older brother wasn't around, I think the younger brother would have made a totally different choice. I think the older brother, was determined, because I think the trainer and some of the other people in his life, maybe that guy from the mosque, maybe someone else, I think they were trying to talk to him. They were trying to get him to see, but because I got the sense from that trainer, maybe, I don't know. I got the sense from the trainer was trying to tell him like, yes, this sucks about the Olympics. I get it.
But don't give up.
I get it.
Yeah.
But don't give up. There's other options. There's other things.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So,
but then we learn this story about 2 years before the Boston bombing on 9/11 in Waltham, Mass. There are 3 dead bodies. This case is still open. And 25-year-old Brandon Mess is found dead. And this is the best friend of Tamerlan. And the trainer, John, says he sees Tamerlan the next day and he goes, wow, this is your best friend. I'm so sorry. And he said that Tamerlan was really dismissive. And he says, if you sell drugs and do bad things, this is what happens. And then he disappears for a while and he comes back and he's very, very different. So this is then Tamerlan goes to Dagestan that summer, the summer of 2012. And this is when the FBI gets that memo about him saying jihad on the phone and the Guardian screening. And then this is around the time that they then learn about that the white hat is the younger brother. And then how do you pronounce the younger brothers?
Dzhokhar,
because the D is silent. Dzhokhar. Got it. Okay.
So Dzhokhar's the younger brother, the white hat. Tamerlan is the older brother, Black Hat.
And then that ends the second episode. So it's like now they're searching for Dzhokhar. Like, where is Dzhokhar?
Yeah.
Because he's out and he's missing. And I think at this point, they're trying to operate on the older brother. I don't know if he was pronounced dead or not. I don't know how he could still be alive after being shot that many times and being run over.
Yeah. So after Dzhokhar takes off in the car, then where does he, I guess... Okay.
Well, they then find him later. They find him later on, but
right. I'm just trying to figure out what if he must have like abandoned the car close by and then went back to the neighborhood. Okay, go on. Just
so episode 3 starts with the Soviet Union in 1944. So we get a little bit of history. So back in 1944, Stalin decided that the Chechen nation was going to help Nazi Germany. So he put them in cattle cars and sent them to this remote region of Central Asia. And, half of them died on the way there. And I guess apparently what happened, they all went, Stalin just shipped them all out there and said, kind of, fight for me, and then ditched them there and said, make a life. And figure it out.
Yeah. Well, it was, they've been treating these people horribly for, centuries because they're Muslim in an area that's, obviously dominated by the Soviet Union and which is not Muslim. So they've just been oppressed. Mm-hmm. Those people have just been treated horribly for a very long time. And I don't know what happened to them. Yeah. But they're very resilient.
Yes, they are.
They have time and time again, rebuilt their lives, tried to, maintain their culture and their people together. I mean, they're incredibly resilient. And was it their grandfather was the one who?
Yeah, I believe so. It was their grandfather who then was a scrap metal. He was looking for scrap metal, didn't realize what he picked up, and he died. Mm-hmm. Their father remained, and then he and his wife were able to get asylum. They came here. And again, back to looking for the American dream. And then came to Boston, tiny apartment. And then we get into, then there's like all these reports of a pipe bomb on the T. And this is when they shut down. So they're now looking for,
they know who they're, they know
who they're looking for. They know he's got to be around here. They know, so they decide, okay, we've got to shut down Watertown. We got to just shut it down. Mm-hmm. And they also don't want him leaving the city, obviously. So they were like, we got to shut everything down. And they've got officers from all over, and a lot of them
were not asked to be there.
Yes. Many, many, many of them coming from New Hampshire, other states, not asked to be there at all.
Yeah. That was amazing. Just the descent. I mean, there were thousands, tens of thousands of all different types of law enforcement just roaming the streets.
Yeah. Nobody asked them to be there.
There's no control, no direction. I don't know who's in charge.
Yeah.
It was unreal.
So, and then they find the brother's apartment in Cambridge. They find a bunch of bomb making paraphernalia. Tamerlan is married to this woman, Catherine Russell, the most white name.
I know.
So she is a practicing Muslim. She is not cooperative. She does not get charged, but basically she has no remorse or sympathy. She's not going to help the U.S. government at all. So that's that. And, they release the name of the bombers. And to the parents, I guess they find the parents back in Dagestan. Mm-hmm. We start to meet some of the people that knew the boys, and especially the younger one. I think everyone's so shocked because he was such a charismatic kid. And so we learn a little bit more about Dzhokhar and the parents. I guess the parents, while they were here, they eventually got divorced. So I guess for Dzhokhar, it was sort of this perfect storm, right? He was this charismatic kid in high school. His parents get divorced.
Yeah.
So he's his parents get divorced. They both go back to Dagestan separately. He's left here. He goes to UMass Dartmouth, which is way far south of Massachusetts, way down. And so all of this happens right when he enters college, and it's such a vulnerable time for you. Like, I do think, I'm sure his parents were having a hard time, but they could have stayed. One of them could have stayed here for another year or two until he kind of got situated, but okay. And then he became really, closer to his brother. And what happened was that Dad was very controlling of Tamerlan. And then Tamerlan became super controlling of Dzhokhar. And he told everyone he was doing really well and he was thriving. And in truth, he was failing out of all of his classes and running a drug operation, but selling weed. But he was not doing well. Dzhokhar was lost and confused. So they went down to UMass Dartmouth to see if he was there, but he wasn't. But and what they did when they went down to UMass Dartmouth, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of like, come out now, scaring all these
poor
kids,
roommates. Yeah.
Unreal.
Yeah. Didn't they told all the students to leave, and all the students are out there crying and they don't know what's going on.
But they don't even know if he's in there. They think, well, maybe he's there, and it's like, he's not even there. Now, this is when the stay indoors orders, this is when Obama called and we're like, okay, we got to lift this. This has been crazy. This is like the end. Where are the rest of my notes? Oh, I skipped a page. That's why. So this is when, at this point, they're kind of like, we have no more leads. We don't know what else to do. We're like, there's so many police officers. They're looking at like inside garbage cans, like every last
going door to
crevice, of everything, looking. And so they're all like, no one's had any sleep. We're going crazy. We're, let's just take a break. Let's just take a moment. And then all of a sudden they take a break. They get a call from someone in Watertown and they says, I have a boat in my driveway. There's blood all over it. And it looks like someone's in it. And so the first guy that we meet, the one that was running in the marathon, Billy Evans, he says, well, let me go and check it out. And he's like, I want to, let's quietly approach this. I think maybe this is the guy. Mm-hmm. He's like, well, but I don't know what's going on. I don't know if he has a suicide vest. I don't know if he's armed in there. I don't know what's going on. And he's like, but I know if I call, it's going to be the cavalry, but I don't, but I also don't, if he could also blow up this boat and this house and everything else.
Yeah.
And, so of course he calls for backup and the cavalry comes in and all of these officers. And again, we don't know who shot first. We still don't know who, I don't know. But again, more gunfire, a bunch of people not authorized to be there. There's like 126 rounds of gunfire.
It sounded like more than that because they played the video and again, it was just like just as bad or worse as the first shootout.
It's insane. These people, it's
insane.
Just, because the thing is, he didn't have a gun, did he? He didn't have a gun in there.
I don't know, because I think they only had one gun.
Yeah, because they had
between
one gun
the two
and
of
a
them.
Bunch of, because I don't think they ever got they never got the Cambridge guy. Yeah,
right.
Gun.
They never got a second gun. They had one gun, and that gun jammed. And I'm sure they retrieved that at the crimes. That's why they started throwing those pipe bombs at the police. So
he had nothing in that. He had nothing in there at all.
And not only, it's a miracle that no police got shot, no civilians got shot. And, they shot Dzhokhar, but he survived somehow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Just crazy.
Yeah. So, and a bunch of people that should not be there at all. It was just unreal.
Yeah. No, I guess. And you know what? Somebody just heard a gunshot.
Mm-hmm.
That's all, because they were telling the officers, don't shoot, stand down, whatever. And somebody hears a gunshot. And I don't even think it was from Dzhokhar. I think it was just random. And the minute they hear it, they all just start shooting randomly.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So they got him out, and they wanted him alive because they wanted him to talk, because what they really needed to know was, is there something else going to happen?
You part of a cell.
Are you part of something bigger? You know, is there going to, because the other thing that we haven't really talked about is that everyone was on edge, right? And if you remember, if you were alive at 9/11, you know how that was. Like after 9/11, it was like, there were so many threats of, should we cross the bridge? Should we go here? Should we go there? I don't know. There, don't you remember, right? There was always like these fear of like, is there going to be another attack here? Is there going to be another attack there? So that's how everyone was feeling. So they wanted him to be alive. So they finally got him in custody. It was 101 hours later.
Yeah. Didn't they'd use some sort of machine, like a robot machine, to approach the boat and then because there was a cover, like a soft cover over the boat, and then rip the cover off. And then I guess they descended upon him, and he'd been shot multiple times.
Yeah. So, and then, all the people are lining up on the streets. They're very emotional. Everyone's chanting USA, USA.
Yeah. See, this part I found, upsetting.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad. I mean, I know they're happy that the guy was caught or whatever. They still don't know if it's over. They just know this guy's been found. And the chanting of USA and all this other kind of stuff, it's kind of like, what does that have to do with anything? Like, this is a tragedy.
Yeah.
It's a tragedy all around. It's a tragedy for these brothers, their family,
parents,
for everybody, for our country, for their country, it's a complete tragedy. And celebratory stuff, I didn't like that.
Yeah. Well, and I do want to talk about all this at the end. And then the next day, 4/20, they did a big tribute for the police at Fenway Park. And then this was very famous, David Ortiz, otherwise known as Big Papi, makes this big announcement. This is our fucking city. And so they try to question Dzhokhar. And
after he got out of surgery.
After he got out of surgery, they tried to. And then I guess, so apparently you can question someone without a lawyer for how long?
Well, this is a post 9/11, Patriot Act change to the law, where if you're suspected of terrorism, they can question you. Even if you ask for a lawyer, they can continue to question you. And that's what they did. And he was writing, he couldn't speak, I guess.
Yeah.
So he was writing notes, and he was like, lawyer, ? He's saying, I know my rights. Basically telling them to fuck off.
Yeah.
Not going to answer any questions.
Yeah. And then this was the best, where they go to they start like going through his stuff, and they found this, I don't know if this was the reporter that found this, like that he had this magazine. I think it was Tamerlan that had this magazine, Inspire magazine, which is like the official magazine of Al Qaeda, where you can learn, like one of the articles was how to make a bomb in the kitchen of your mom. I was like, I was dying. I was like, just thinking about like, what are the articles in Inspire magazine? Like the top looks to overthrow your government, like, like the best backpacks for, bombs, like cute day looks for bomb making.
Well, yeah. And that was one of the things that Ed Davis said. He didn't buy the fact that was floating around, everyone saying that these guys made these homemade bombs. And he didn't really buy it, because he said in order for the bombs to go off, remotely, to detonate remotely, and both of them went off perfectly, that's not easy to do, and he seemed to think that they had some kind of help or something, or
yeah. So I mean, yeah,
do it themselves.
That seems to be this thing of like, were they lone wolf extremists? I mean, we still don't know, right? Were they lone wolf extremists, or are they part of something bigger? And then there's this weird story of like 2 weeks later in Orlando, we meet this guy who was interviewed by the FBI, who is a friend of Tamerlan's, who confessed to killing with Tamerlan those 3 men way back in Waltham. And he said the 2 killed them, and Brendan murdered them after he found out that there would be no Olympics. And he did it because he said, his friend is, he's Jewish friend, and he had the American dream, and he was rich, and he didn't have to work. And so that's what happened. And the reporter from the Boston Globe did some research, and he went to Dagestan. He wanted to know like what was going on with Tamerlan, like what was happening. So he went and he met with friends. He tried to figure out, is there a connection between Tamerlan and actual militants? And, he was trying to figure out, and there was no connection, like no friends, no family. There was no one that he met that, and what he really said was they weren't born bombers. There was nothing there that they, and this reporter had a real personal reason for, I think wanting to understand the motivation of these brothers, because his father was in one of the planes that hit the Twin Towers on 9/11. And I thought that was, I mean, I think he just wanted answers, like answers he would have wanted, about who killed his father. Yeah. And then very sad, just all of this, thinking about it anyway. And then on March 4th, 2015, I mean, we obviously know he did it. It wasn't a case of guilty or innocent. It was a case of, will he get the death penalty, or will he spend the rest of his life in prison? And March 4th, 2015.
Well, they still had to convict him. Oh, okay. I mean, I don't think he entered a plea.
Did he?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I kind of doubt it. Maybe he did. Because if he was going to enter a plea, it would be in exchange for not getting the death penalty. And he got the death penalty. So there was a trial. They had to prove all of this.
Yes. And his defense was that he was highly influenced by his brother and controlled by his brother. And what they really used was all of those videotapes of him like getting milk, that he very much, like, it wasn't his brother forcing him to put that backpack down next to those kids, that he, consciously did that himself. And then one thing we mentioned earlier is when we meet Karen, we don't see it at first, but when we zoom out on Karen, we see that she lost her leg in the bombing, and that her best friend Crystal died, and that she testified, and there was an impact statement. And, we see a lot of the other people who lost limbs, and the parents and the kids and everyone that was affected. And I mean, I'm with you at the end of this. That's how I felt too. And anytime I watch these documentaries, I always feel horrible, because I always think about the parents of the murderers, of the people that did these crimes, where it's not so black and white. It's not black hat, white hat, right? It's not one thing or the other. These boys were not born bombers. No. Neither of them were born evil or born of, their parents parents didn't decide that they were going to do any of these things. I think that this is one thing about life that I think is so hard for us to wrap our heads around, which is, why are some people able to cope with certain situations, and why are some people aren't? And everybody is dealt a certain hand in life, and it's not fair. It's never going to be fair. And, some people are just able to deal with the cards that they're dealt, much better than other people. And then why are some people, and when you get into these moments in time, these perfect, and why why I can't remember the younger son's name. Boys, Dzhokhar.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really one of those things where you look back on that and you think like, God, if one of those parents or God, if he had maybe went to a different college and had a different roommate or some other circumstance, or if the brother got busy doing something else, like just one small, not small, but like some little detail, like the brother decided to stay in Chechnya, or you know what I mean?
But I think
how that would be so different. Cause I think that the younger brother could have gotten on a very different path.
Yeah. I mean, I think what it all comes down to, so, our brains are all different. People are not born bad, but we're born with different brains, I think. And then you pile on top of trauma. Mm-hmm. And this is all, it's just a buildup of trauma. And I know from like talking to lawyers I know who do death penalty cases, when they do a report, it's called a mitigation report to, inform the court of, why this person shouldn't be sentenced to death. And it's all full of every single tragedy and bad thing that happened to them, every injury they ever had. And what comes out is, so many people have, injuries, brain damage. It could come from like all different kinds of forms of abuse, malnourishment. I mean, these are refugees. Just being a refugee is a huge trauma. We don't know what they went through in Chechnya. And trauma and that kind of stuff is passed down through the generations. And so these two brothers are at the end of, hundreds of years of trauma, just all kind of settles in these boys. And then everything that happened to them, they come here, in the wake of 9/11, whatever. Just if you really sit down and think about their lives and everything, it's an unimaginable amount of trauma. Mm-hmm. And I just think that, when you get to that level, it's not like, oh, I didn't make the Olympic team. So it wasn't just that. Mm-hmm. Think about everything that he and his family and his ancestors had been through before he found out he couldn't go to the Olympics. That just gave him something to hang his hat on. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think it's just so sad. And I realized the city of Boston was traumatized, all these victims traumatized, but I don't think we should celebrate we're not comparing traumas or, one thing shouldn't be more important than the other. What happened to these boys and young men was just as traumatic as the bombing.
Yeah. What I think is interesting is both, Kevin and Karen, what's their last name again? McWaters. They had said that he didn't, Dzhokhar didn't have any remorse, that he looked cocky. He would stare straight at you. And I don't know. I thought that was so interesting because in my mind, I have a hard time believing that this, and maybe I'm a fool. Maybe, listen, I believed Casey Anthony. So maybe I'm a fool.
Me too.
But in my heart, I just feel like I think that's what he needs to do to kind of survive.
Yeah.
I feel like he has to pretend. I think he kind of has to pretend like I had a reason for doing this in order to justify doing it. Do you know what I mean? I kind of feel like he has to put on airs and he has to be cocky and mean and rude.
Compartmentalize.
I think the whole thing of like him flipping off, or maybe he was flipping off Boston or Matt. It's like, I don't think this got anything to do with Boston or I don't think it's got anything to do with any of that. I think he's just the same way, Karen and Kevin have to hate him.
Right.
Have to make him evil in order to kind of get through your day.
Right.
I think he has to be cocky and see himself as as some kind of, I don't know, like representative of whatever his motivation was, whatever the cause was that made him put that backpack down.
Yeah, it's very complex. And so
it is.
It's not just like, it's very complex. It's not so simple. So,
oh God.
Yeah. All around. Yeah. I know. All around just a tragedy, but an excellent documentary.
Yes, it was. Highly recommend.
Excellent. And very well done. And, it'll take you back to all that and with some, perspective. And so, Dzhokhar is still on death row.
Yeah. And where is he being held? Like some super
some federal prison somewhere.
And I would assume, right? He's probably spending like 23 hours a day in
I'm
some
sure
room somewhere. He probably has like no friends and no nothing. I mean, it's just a really sad. And I mean, I know people are probably thinking like, why do you feel bad for him? But it's like a real crap existence. I mean, it's just real. I mean, it's just, and then he's just going to die. Like it just all sucks. It just all sucks.
Yeah. No, the whole
all sucks.
The whole thing is, it's a tragedy.
Yeah.
Anyway, on that note.
Well, on that note, why don't you follow us on Instagram?
Yes. If you want
something a little bit lighter.
Yeah. Please follow us on Instagram at Psych Legal Pop. And on TikTok, we are Psych Legal Pop Podcast. And also, if you enjoy our podcast, if you could leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, that would be great. We'd appreciate that.
And subscribe.
Oh, yes. Forgot. Most important thing. Just subscribe. Hit the subscribe button so that the episodes will automatically be downloaded.
Yes. And tell a friend.
You won't have to think about it. Tell your friends. If you have any ideas for documentaries or things you want us to cover, let us know. Someone had sent us a message about the Teal Swan.
Yes.
Documentary. Which
I don't really do that.
Yeah. I remember when that came out.
It's on Hulu.
Okay.
We should do that.
So we will do that since we're now looking for content for our Thursday show. Now Was Blind is over. So looking forward to that. And give us some more ideas. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.
Pepsi Prebiotic Cola in original and cherry vanilla. That Pepsi taste you love, with no artificial sweeteners, only 30 calories, just 5 grams of sugar, and 3 grams of prebiotic fiber. That great Pepsi taste with even more to love. Pepsi Prebiotic Cola. Unbelievably Pepsi.
Looking for a fun night out? K1 Speed puts you behind the wheel for an adrenaline-filled time you and your friends will never forget. Off the track, the fun keeps rolling with arcade games, great food, and drinks. They even have private party rooms for your birthday parties and corporate outings. Race hard, laugh harder, and claim your spot on the podium. K1 Speed. More than racing, it's an experience.